Patrick Kingshill is an artist from Eureka, California. As a mixed media artist, Patrick works primarily with clay and has done so for over a decade. He finds purpose in his work through his rich familial ties to the crafts and his appreciation for craft traditions in the United States and around the world. He holds a BFA in Studio Arts from San Jose State University and an MFA in the Peters Valley School of Crafts in Layton, New Jersey. And as an apprentice in the Jingdezhen, China, under the ceramic artist Takashi Yasuda. Most recently, he has worked under the shipwright Leo Goulden and Pete Stein on the rebuild and restoration of Tally Ho, a 1910 classic wooden sailing yacht. He currently lives and works in Port Townsend, Washington, so I'd like to welcome him to the stage. Thank you.
Hi, how is everybody? Welcome to Anderson Ranch. So I just have a few images of kind of a chronology of my work and some one thing led to another kind of talk here. I always like to start with Sutro Tower, which is which at the time of this picture at least was the tallest man-made structure in the entire city of San Francisco and the surrounding areas. It's kind of got mixed reviews amongst the locals. A lot of people, some people like it. A lot of people hate its guts. It's kind of just something that's been in the back of my head for my whole life. Growing up outside the city, I used to visit the city a lot, and I was just kind of fascinated by this gigantic thing. And the build of it and the structural integrity of this thing kind of seeped its way into my work. And I think this is a piece from undergrad that I think sort of sums up my aesthetic and my approach to making things as sort of a blend of the built environment and of design of a lot of different facets of our world. And this is a pot that I made. And so, yeah, that's kind of more or less my philosophy. I've been working in mixed media for several years, and I have to credit my old professor, Stan Welsh, who is a big friend of Anderson Ranch. Some people here may know Stan. He was a student of Paul Soldner, who is one of the founding fathers of this place. And so I, of course, did undergrad with him and basically just ripped him off exactly, which is what I think every good undergrad should do, just rip off your teachers. And I was making these wooden panels that were sort of an attempt to contextualize like the poetry of the vessel and just the kind of the bliss and beauty of ceramic pottery. And I am clicking to go to the next slide. I guess we're all just looking at that one for a while. There we go. So yeah, I worked in this kind of panel format for a long time. And it wasn't until later on after undergrad into graduate school that I sort of started working with wood as more of a collaborative medium with ceramics, in this case on a set of cup and saucers. There's another one. And I come from a place that's known for its gigantic redwood trees and a super rich history in the lumber industry. Basically, after the gold rush more or less dried out, there was a huge push to harvest the gigantic sequoia redwood trees of Northern California. And it's something that I just sort of grew up right in the center of the bubble. And we're known to have this real elaborate kind of gingerbreading architecture around. It's definitely the established vernacular architecture of my hometown is this Victorian very ornate woodworking. And that last picture was the Carson Mansion. This is the Carter House Inn, which are only a few blocks away from each other in the town of Eureka, California, which is where I was born. So that was kind of ingrained in me. And at the last year of undergrad, I did a study abroad where I went to England, and all of a sudden was exposed to this super rich history of bricklaying, and of basically the architectural vernacular had a huge shift, and that was really striking to me. And so after that trip, I started thinking more about how can these two materials work together. I started taking my woodworking a lot more seriously, I think, and tried to make a more cohesive collaboration between materials, and started doing some more like complementary compositions of work. And while I was in England, I came across the work of Takashi Yasuda, who is a Japanese-born porcelain artist who lived in England for a long time. He currently lives and works in Jingdezhen, China. And I got an opportunity to be his apprentice for about a month and a half during the summer of 2016, which coincidentally, one day I was walking around the streets of Jingdezhen, and I actually ran into Trey Hill during my trip, who is teaching in the metal and ceramics workshop. But anyway, that was a super fulfilling time where I got to learn about mold making. He was doing this very elaborate mold making process at the time, and this is a little video of what we were working on. He's basically making several different sizes of teacups, and there was a super elaborate process of taking apart an 8-part mother mold just to make like a tiny little piece of plaster that would go in the archive of plaster molds. And it was one of those things where like all of these pieces of waxed plaster and hydrocal would just slot together with like this super precision, and it just like hit all kinds of pleasure sensors on me. So that was a great experience, and there's one of the pieces I just brought out. So, and the other experience, of course, was just being in the city of Jingdezhen, which is widely known as the porcelain capital of the world. They've been making the majority of the world's prized porcelain, imperial Chinese porcelain, since roughly the 1300s. I'm not an expert on the history of this stuff, but they have an eons old tradition in making porcelain, and that was awesome to witness. This is one of the scenes that you'd see just walking through one of the main workshops in Jingdezhen, where you've got people carrying works in progress, maybe half a mile across the city, and just getting bisqueware to the kilns and such. So it was amazing. And after I got back, I started incorporating plaster into my work in whatever way I could. I was still kind of working with this format of like making a pedestal for this like prized ceramic vessel. And so I started incorporating a plaster block to being kind of like the foundation pedestal of my work. And I'm at the same time, I'm looking a lot at architectural models. I think I just love architectural models. I don't really know what to say beyond that, but I just love the idea of like looking at a building from a God perspective and just like shrinking yourself down and imagining tiny little people walking through this amazing place. This model here is a little nod to another craft school. This is Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in Deer Isle, Maine. one of my favorite models. And I guess one of the reasons that I bring that up is because these bases and platforms, I started thinking them as kind of like a landscape, where these plaster blocks would be like the cast foundation that would hold the sculpture, and it sort of would nod to that, scale shift that I really love playing with, kind of shifting scale. And I got more into making work that was a little bit of nods to different places I lived in. This is a piece that's loosely based on a bricklaying technique that I would come across a lot while living in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is where I got my master's degree. This is my master's thesis exhibition from 2018 that had a lot of nods to the Midwest. There's some like weather vanes and telephone pole riffs in there. A lot of like scenes of grain silos and antique stores and just casting kind of a wide net on influence from all around me. Also, growing up in a small town, I kind of like always had a yearning to get the hell out of there and see bigger cities. And this piece right here is kind of like it's sort of a cityscape of pots, I kind of think of. This is a picture to the left took while walking through Shanghai. They have a really awesome pedestrian walkway where you can just weave through the cityscape and see all the gargantuan buildings. So I kind of wanted to recreate that in a still life. This is a piece based on my commute to and from work, to and from school, where there's, I would pass by the train and an antique shop and a telephone pole. There's a windsock there and a grain silo. And that's pretty much, I would kind of come across scenes like this all over Nebraska. I don't know if Louise is in the audience, but she's probably seen this. This is the one on the way to Home Depot, so we go to that all the time. Yeah, so I think at this stage is when I really started to dive completely into woodworking and ceramics as a co-equal member of my work. And I've always loved having this kind of like, formal, abstract nod to the places I'm at or wherever I'm find myself at the time. And the most recent place I've lived is Santa Fe, New Mexico. And of course, the landscape there is starkly different than pretty much anywhere else in the world. Started making a lot of cactus pots and just kind of had prickly pear cactus as sort of a background character and a lot of hikes and things we would go on. And so that just naturally would kind of come up as a subject. And then I also really loved kind of geeking out on architecture. This is a building by I.M. Pye that's in, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, but this is a building in Boston, and I think it's really interesting because it's just like this hulking concrete block. But if you look directly at it, you can see all the way through. It's got a matching window pattern on the other side of the building. So you can see air flowing just directly through the whole building. And I wanted to recreate that in a sculpture. You looking at the building straight on, you can see all the people walking through the offices. And I just thought that was such a beautiful contrast between like a huge weighted concrete behemoth with like all individual people that you can see each person. So, and this is a recent piece I did a couple of years ago that's sort of pulling from drawbridges and other like counterweighted pieces of infrastructure. And yeah, I've been kind of riffing on this whole idea of setting and the singular ceramic piece that speaks to like volume and architecture and everything. I've been fortunate enough for the past couple years to work with a design firm in Chicago who's really honored my work by using kind of selected parts from my my collection as decor for houses and everything. They do these curated interiors, and we work together on an exclusive line of lighting and of like sculptural accoutrement, and it's a new challenge for me. It's a really interesting new field, the whole design world. It's like an entirely different realm of working with customers and working with clients and everything. It's been really fascinating and just really fun to have a collaborator in an interior designer who's interpreting your work. In kind of a different way as I've always been. It's been a really cool eye-opening experience for me, and they take awesome pictures, so that's really nice. This is the Glass House, the Illinois Glass House by the Mies van der Rohe house. It has another name that I'm spacing on right now. And most recently, I've been in contact with, I've been working for the Tally Ho project, which is the rebuild and restoration of a 112-year-old classic wooden sailing yacht. We have a YouTube channel that is actually how I found the project. When COVID happened, like a lot of us, my art practice kind of ground to a halt, and I didn't have an avenue to teach anymore. And I'd never had a real experience to formally learn and practice woodworking. I've always been kind of self-taught or just taught by my family, who's all carpenters. But it's been awesome to learn from Leo Goulden and Pete Stein here, who I think are my huge mentors in my life. The boat is it is a rebuild. It's an entire rebuild of this classic wooden yacht that is entirely rotted out. We had to replace every single piece of wood in the 60-foot long sailboat. So there's lots of work yet to be done and lots of work that's been done. I've been on the project for a couple years, and it's just opened an entirely new, a whole new avenue of craftsmanship and tool knowledge and everything. This is an example of a stepped full lap half dovetail notch that's going to accept a beam that will hold up the top deck of the boat. And this is a picture right after we finished dry fitting the entire deck structure. And this more or less is the boat as she is right now. We a few months ago laid the top deck. The covering boards have been put on by some of the more experienced people on the crew. A lot of interior work is happening, and it's a really awesome, thrilling project, and I encourage everybody to check out our work on YouTube, on Samson Boat Co. On YouTube. And lastly, I just have a few pictures of my studio that I built in Santa Fe, mainly because I'm really proud of it, and also because I think that a studio is really an artist's most important collaborator. I worked my ass off to make this studio happen, it kind of happened out of necessity where I couldn't really afford to pay rent for a house and a studio at the same time, so I built a house and a studio. And there's a picture of my kitchen and my lounge area, and then the entire rest of the garage is dedicated to a clay studio and a small woodworking section. And that's it for me. Thanks so much.